Yeah,
Sorry, I'm running behind a minute or two.
it's okay. No problem, bro.
All right, we're live.
Yeah, guy. Yeah, friggin' guy. Yeah, guy. What's up, bro? Yeah, we are spitballing. It is spit. This is All Things Surf, a podcast. David Lee Scales, Scott Bass with you here, and it is Tuesday, September 1st. Is it? Yes, it's the first day of September. David, welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Good to see you once again on our weekly schedule now. We
Yeah, for the
I,
time being.
I mean, I think it's good. We're doing I guess we missed a week just recently, but
Well,
good
next
to
week's
see you
not going to happen.
weekly. Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why I was laughing. Next week's not going to happen.
Are you doing your surf trip that you teased us with last week?
Um, I'm actually going on a bowling trip. I'll be bowling at various bowling locales. I've got lawn bowling lined up with the smaller ball that's kind of got more of a, like it's just easier to control. And then I've got
Yes.
big bowling lined up at a traditional bowling alley. And then there's some other bowling that's going to come into play.
So do you travel with your own bowling balls?
I used to, but it gets too expensive. They're a pain to carry around the airport. So there's this new bowling ball rental company out there. And so I use them. It's a great service. I tell them
Away ball.
no, I can't tell you the name of it because I don't want my balls to be, already rented. Yeah, but it's a great service.
Let me ask you this. What venues are you going to go bowling at?
Well, again, that's because there's limited resource. I can't tell you exactly where I'm going to be bowling. There's
10
only
lanes,
so many.
10 pins, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's just a limited number of pins. And like lawn bowling's outside, so the wind affects it too. So you want to be able to lawn bowl when it's lack of wind because you don't. Yeah.
So that's good. That's a good detail for me to use my investigative process. This is outdoor, natural bowling. You're not
Well,
going.
the lawn bowling is, of course, outdoors.
I don't know where you could get both lawn and indoor. Where
That's
is
why I'm
there a
keeping
venue?
it a secret. That's why it's a secret. I can't tell you exactly where I do my bowling.
Okay, in the time of COVID, in the age of the virus,
Yes.
what are the protocols for traveling to go lawn bowling?
Well, I have, you might be able to see this. This is a hand sanitizer that you use between each and every bowl. You spray this on your fingers.
Right.
And then when you retrieve the ball, if it had picked up any COVID along the way, you clean your hands, and then you're set for your next roll.
What about the authorities? Are you going to be crossing any borders? Do you have to be tested to travel?
Not that I know of, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Completely unrelated. Will you be bringing any surfboards with you on this bowling trip?
Yes,
And
yes, I will.
Which
I'm glad
boards,
you brought that.
what boards are you considering for the trip?
This board behind me that you see that I was showing off last week,
Yep.
and my friend Don Sanford Shapes, he made me this wooden surfboard. It's Polonia with some koa, and it's 5'10", and it's made with like a ribbed construction kind of, well, very, very similar to the way the guys at Grain do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's this Polonia sort of deck and bottom. And look at Sophia. Is it Sophia or Sophie?
Yep, both. When she's in trouble, it's Sophia, but in general, it's Sophie. Sometimes Soph.
She has an incredible disposition.
Yeah,
her demeanor is. She's just really. She's beautiful, man. She's so beautiful. You're so stoked. Look at that beautiful dog.
She really, talking about disposition, honestly, I can't overstate it. We've done well to like give her consistent discipline and affection and all that, but she showed up with a great disposition. We're only just kind of helping aid the process. It
Yeah.
was pure luck. So
Now, are you taking her to socialization classes?
um so we're not allowed to actually take her out in public until all her vaccines are done, which will be the end of the month, but we can take her places where we know the dogs are fully vaccinated. So we have friends and both of our parents have dogs, and we have been taking them there. So,
All right.
and my girlfriend Lauren's parents have a pool, so we've taken her over there and she's going in the pool, swimming, all that sort of stuff. So the
Oh, that's
answer is
pretty cool.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She needs to be acclimated to other dogs so that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, she is. She's really good so far. But back to your board.
Yeah.
So wood framing.
Yeah. It's 5'10". It's a cool little board. I've been riding it. The waves have gone flat, as you know. It's just been horrid.
We had a
And
couple little days of south, like straight south swell the last few days.
oh yeah, it doesn't really get in here. There's
Yeah.
been some small little 3-footers if you hunt them down, but because the water chilled down again, it's been hard to hunt down 2-foot surf.
Dude, it was literally 78 one week, and then within 4 or 5 days it was 64 degrees.
Yeah, it's really chilly down here. But anyway, that's one of the boards I'm taking on my bowling trip.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I know Grain sells kits so that you could
Yes.
actually make your own board. Does he do that as well?
You know, I'm not sure. I know that he and his sons make skateboards.
Oh,
He
okay.
has an incredible wood shop. Like his wood shop's just like out of this world, insane, like uber insane wood shop. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than to say it's a professional wood shop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because he's like he is a carpenter and a construction, developer by
Oh,
trade.
okay.
So he builds custom homes and stuff.
Got it.
But so I think that they're going to start production of surfboards. That's my gut feeling.
Okay.
And again, this one's special, as we mentioned last time. This is sort of a prototype because I really wanted a board that didn't have any fiberglass on the bottom or the deck. I wanted wood on water, no fiberglass between the wood. I wanted to try to get as pure a flex pattern that wood provides. And again, I might be, and I am, I'll just say I am rather naive and clueless about anything that has to do with wood and how it bends relative to foam and fiberglass, and it's all just a learning process, which is what life is really. And as soon as I think I know it all, that's when you need to shoot me, because it's fun to learn, and that's kind of what we're doing. At least I am. I'm in the learning process here with the wood.
Shooting you because you don't know something is a pretty drastic measure.
I know, and I'd be dead already, right?
The reason why I was asking if he sells the kits is just because once you design that framework, it's for a specific board, like a specific size and a specific model. You can't just transfer that frame into a fish or whatever else. So once you design all of that intricacy, you want to be able to replicate it, obviously.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I see your Simon Jones. Is that Simon Jones behind you?
It is, yeah. I
see your Simon Jones behind you, and frankly, this board, I would like it if I could get this technology in a bigger board. I would like to get a mid-length in this, and that's simply not doable until you create sort of that framework, which you can then just punch out 100 of them.
Right.
But it's kind of fun that we're talking about surfboards, because I just finished watching Noah Dean's electric acid surfboard test on Stab.
Mm-hmm.
They put it up for free. I have a list of the 10 boards, David, and sort of my thoughts on this. I don't know if you've watched this. Maybe we should wait until you've seen this, or did you pay to watch this?
No, I did not pay to watch it. I watched all of the 3 to 5 minute clips that they put out through the last couple of months, but I haven't watched the film in its entirety. I would like to talk about it because there's a couple of tangents that I think I have that relate exactly to it. And I'm not sure which direction we should go first because we'll probably forget if we don't do it in some cohesive fashion. But while you mentioned this mid-length behind me, I actually interviewed Simon Jones. I'll probably publish it next week or something.
Yeah.
And it was a great chat. It was kind of it reminded me of just like those guys, like that whole collective of Simon as the shaper. I mean, you could even lump in Albie Falzon as the filmmaker that was the genesis with Morning of the Earth, and the surfboard brand, or the board building brand, is Morning of the Earth surfboards. But then Torrin Martin as a surfer, Ishka Folkwell as the filmmaker, and Neat Essentials as the brand that kind of puts it all together. They're all so good at what they do, and they all fit one another's styles so perfectly. Like none of it is contrived. The surfing, Torrin surfing Simon's boards is a match made in heaven. I don't know that you could have taken any other high performance shortboarder and asked them to ride those boards and they would really connect with them in the way that Torrin has. Because by the way, Torrin was a high performance shortboarder in his youth, you know, when Simon met him. So like he does Simon's boards a justice that I don't know a lot of other surfers would. But through doing that, it's opened up that genre of surfboard, the mid-length and the fuller volume thing, to everybody else. And it turns out it's more applicable to guys like you and I, to new surfers, average surfers, beginner surfers. It's more applicable to everybody, and it's applicable in waves from 1 foot to head high. And it's much more user-friendly than pointy thrusters ever were, you know? And that pairing of those guys have just been kind of the perfect little secret sauce, I think, to unlock it.
Yeah, yeah, you bring up some good points. I would also suggest to you that that whole genesis, that whole beginnings of that thing, is actually goes way, way back, as you know. That whole Byron Bay sort of, that whole scene there runs basically from, I would suggest, maybe the central coast of New South Wales all the way up to the Sunshine Coast. But specifically, I mean, if you wanted to find the little bubble of it, it's the Byron Bay area, right? And so, I mean, when you think about, you know, generations past, I mean, obviously you think Greeno, and then you know, there's Dick Van Stralen. There's a bunch of guys in that little zone that created this thing that has now sort of bubbled again to the surface in a cyclical fashion with Simon Jones and Torrin. And of course, you know, you've got Rasta in there, and you've got all sorts of shapers. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to just give those guys that you mentioned all the credit for this. I think that area has been bubbling with this thing since you know, day one. I mean, you know, like,
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you were mentioning too, like these boards are applicable for guys like us, you know, like 30 something, 40 something, 50 something surfers. If you look at some of the surf films from back then, like say 1975, 1980, you know, you see footage of like Angary, like Nat Young on riding a 7.2 single fin. You know, like you see footage of Wayne Lynch. You know, I mean, my point is that guys have been riding these 7-foot surfboards forever, specifically in that time period between the single fin. They were trying to make the single fin more maneuverable, and the twin fin sort of coming of age with Reno and MR, specifically MR. That little era there, be like say 76 to 80, was really when guys were trying to find a single fin that had that maneuverability. And anyway, my point is that this is nothing new. Nothing in surfboard design is, as we all know. And but you're right, the aesthetic that they're bringing to it now is sort of interesting. And you know, the first board that he tries, that Noah Dean tries in this stab thing, is the Simon Jones Morning of the Earth surfboard,
which is in the previous version of the electric acid surfboard test. That's the board that Stephanie Gilmore picked as the winner. Not the exact same model, but the Simon Jones board. And by the way, I didn't mean to say that these guys are responsible for this, you know, this new movement. But what I meant to say is that their collective, there's 4 or 5 creatives, and their collective has hit at a moment where they've leveraged YouTube and Instagram and Torrance style and all of those things just all kind of came together to where this is there's like a nexus. Whereas I feel like some of those other things were happening in a geographic area, but maybe they weren't able to if it was happening in Angary, maybe we didn't see it in California, or it was happening simultaneously in California. We didn't know it was happening in Angary until years later, that sort of thing. Right now, the information just travels so fast and they're so good at what they do. And they've captured our collective kind of interest somehow. And it's pretty special, but also Simon references exactly what you said. And he actually pinpoints it to a specific conversation where Albie Falzon was, I think he was in Sydney on a city street, and some nuns were out doing evangelizing essentially. And he was a young, impressionable kid who looked like he was wayward. And the nuns started talking to him and were like, what do you want out of life? You know, what's your direction? What are you doing? What are your ambitions? And through that conversation, it became crystal clear to him that he wanted to make a surf film. He said, I love film and I love surfing, and I would love, it wasn't the answer.
Are you sure there wasn't some LSD mixed into this?
I didn't say there wasn't. And
I talked to some nuns and I decided to make a surf film. That's quite a leap.
He's like, turns out I've never even been to Sydney.
I personally want to go talk to some nuns right now based on this info.
But I mean, for him, it became crystal clear in that moment what he wanted to do. And the ideas were probably floating around before, but until they kind of asked him in a very pointed direction. So Simon was saying, you could even attribute all of these things now to that interaction on a street corner in Sydney. You know,
I'm fascinated by this. I'm claiming now that the Catholic Church is why we are where we are at this moment.
And I mean, I don't think you can deny it.
That is pretty incredible. True. Speaking of which, have you read the book, speaking of Morning of the Earth, have you read the book Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett?
No.
Okay, listeners out there, if you're into reading books or even listening to them, you need to read this book. It's a fascinating, wonderful, page-turning read that I just think is, it's one of those books that everyone should read. It's kind of like Moby Dick. It's like you need to read it, and you're going to enjoy it. Pillars of the Earth.
Okay. What can you give us a quick synopsis?
Well, it's sort of based back in like it's probably, I'm going to say it's right around like 1200, 1300, 1400 AD and Europe, and sort of the struggles of what happens with community and society and church, and it focuses on one couple of people and as they move through the politics of all of this. It's pretty cool. It's really good
fiction.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think you're guaranteed success if you just name your project blank of the Earth?
Yes, I do.
I think so too.
I do. Like Haircut of the Earth, or Coffee of the Earth.
There you go.
You got Surfboard of the Earth.
Winning properties right there.
Music of the Earth. Well, I mean, let's try to find one that doesn't work.
I think they all
Condom of the Earth.
That could be amazing. That's your best one yet, actually. Okay, so back to surfboards.
Okay, yeah. So the electric acid surfboard test. It's on Stab. It's free right now. What I liked about this, and what we've known all along, is that fins make a huge difference. And in fact, maybe this might be a stretch, but maybe fins are actually more important than the board. If I came to you with a finless board with all these options to put fins in it, I bet you could put a combination of fins in it that made you go, you know what? I actually like this board. There's a bunch of combinations where I don't like this board, but there's combinations of fins that make this board make sense to me.
Yeah. And you couldn't do much without the board though.
No, I agree. But, you know, I mean, it would be hard to go surf on a pair of fins. It's true. But I found that to be one of my takeaways.
Well, remember when they put out the little teaser or the short clip with Blake Peters from Panda?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the whole point was with that board, is Noah writing the wrong fins in them. And we talked about it on the show. And then Blake messaged me and goes, hey, I'm really glad that you guys highlighted that, because I felt like my board didn't really, like, it wasn't really done justice, because that's not the way it was meant to be written. It wasn't meant to be written with that setup.
Well, that brings up a whole nother point, which is, and he's correct. I think that the surfer, in this case, Noah Dean, but whoever the surfer is that they pick, they need to spend more time in the water on each board. And I'm suggesting maybe even cut the number of boards down to 5.
Yeah.
Because I mean, look, we got 5 twin fins, like at some point, this can't be a marketing project for the surfboard builder. It has to be look, let's give him a twin fin, a single fin, a tri fin, a 4 fin, and something else, and let's give him time in the water. And I know that there's no right or correct format for this. That's kind of the beauty of this. And I've spoken with Ashton about this, and I know you have too. And believe me, he's heard all of this before, and he's got a really good comeback for why they do 10 boards. And they've thought it all through. They've sat in editorial meetings at the people at Stab and gone through all this. But I do think that more time in the water on each board would be crucial. And I don't like it that the surfer knows which shaper it is beforehand, because I do think that they go into it going, I don't want to sound like a dick and hurt the shaper's feelings if I don't like this board, which is totally normal. And I get it. And in fact, you and I come on here on this podcast, and I quite frankly don't want to say anything bad about any of these boards, because I don't think any boards are bad. 1, 2, I do business with each and every one of these guys. And 3, none of these boards are bad. It's, like you've got different elements that they're riding the boards in. You've got different fins that they're riding them on. You've got you and I, everybody likes a different thickness. And so there's no such thing as a bad surfboard.
But
with that being said,
but wait, you saying that you don't like that the surfer knows which shaper shaped the board? They actually don't. They're not told which shaper shapes the board, but oftentimes they're able to identify it.
Yeah, they can tell. I mean, even Glenn Pang's signature, not his signature, but his script was on the foam, and Michael Mason Ho's like, this is a Pang. At the beginning of the episode, if you watch it.
But Stab doesn't tell them. They figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that they do a better job in the Stab in the Dark of absolutely going, we're not telling you. Whereas in this, I think they're more like, I mean, dude, there's a Bonzer. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
It's pretty obvious that it's a Bonzer. Is it a Campbell Brothers?
Yeah.
Probably. At the beginning, I don't know, did you see the beginning clip where he's asked to figure out each board? He pretty much nails it. He nails all 10 of them.
Right.
And because he's told in advance, by the way, he's like, I think he's told in advance, these are the 10 guys. Can you tell which one's which? Because he immediately goes, oh, this one must be the Panda. You know what I mean? Like, so he's given some clues.
Yeah.
Which, again, there's no right or wrong way to do this thing. But I'm just concerned that because he knows who the 10 shapers are, you can tell, you can read between the lines when he comes in from the water. He's like, it kind of works okay, which is kind of code for, I didn't really like this board.
Yeah.
And he can't really say that because he knows, oh, I'm riding the Panda or I'm riding the Mayhem or what, you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
He's in that place of, which is understandable, but he's in that place where he has to be kind of, tiptoeing around some of his criticism, perhaps.
Right. Which board did he ultimately pick as his favorite?
The Schroff.
That's what I thought.
Which at the beginning of him riding it didn't look that good at all.
Oh, really?
But this is a great example of he spent more and more time on the board, and of any of the boards, this was the one board where you went, God, at the beginning, it didn't look like he knew how to ride it. And at the end, he was absolutely ripping on it.
I felt like it looked too small. Is that what your impression was at the beginning? I remember seeing it and thinking like, yeah, there's not enough volume there. And it looked too thin even. But you're right. By the end, he did. Back to your original point of knowing who the shaper is, I also feel like he went into that liking Peter Schroff and even said like, oh, I love how he's a rabble rouser. And he's like, whatever. Yeah. Like, I like that about his personality. So it's almost like he put some of his own affection on that surfer.
Right. Which is what brings me to my last point. Like, it'd be cool if they didn't even know. If he had no idea that, because Schroff's out of left field. Like, if you hadn't told him, hey, he's one of the 10, I don't think he would have said, oh, this is a Shroff. This must be the Shroff. You know what I mean? So it kind of, I think it would be cool if there's a little bit more anonymity involved there.
Yeah, I agree. So that now let's dig into your conceit. If you just give special, I don't know, affection to a board, can you turn it from a dud into a winner? Like how much of the board's, magic board quality is attributed to your own mental state versus the board's physical design features?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think a lot, actually. I think that I know that you and I have both tried to love a board, because we're like, oh man, this, like we really, really tried to like this board, but it just didn't work for us or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we've all had that experience.
Yeah.
Which is why, again, anonymity, I think is a better thing here for this.
Yeah. Interesting.
I can go through all 10 boards real quick.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Let me just say this, that Stab does a pretty good job of making sure that this isn't a marketing piece for each one of these shapers. And they need to continue with that tone, and Noah Dean's honesty, if you read between the lines in some of his statements, it feels as if he's holding back a little bit. We know Noah as sort of this guy that's ready to fly off the rails, and he's not one that's, in lack of an opinion. And I think when you get Noah Dean, you kind of want more opinion. And I sense that he wanted to put more opinion in it. And I sense that he probably did. And I bet there's some opinion on the editing room floor. And that speaks to a bunch of stuff. Like maybe we shouldn't get a super in the limelight surfer to do this. What if we just got a really good surfer that was an average Joe? What if the surfer his face was blurred out? What if we made the surfer anonymous so that he could be completely unbiased and not worried about how he's going to come off to the general surfing public, especially like potential sponsors and the potential,
Yeah, I mean, so Beach Grit does surfboard reviews and they use an anonymous surfer.
Yeah.
They've never identified who the surfer is, and partially for that exact reason. And so, yeah, there's something to be said about that for sure. But I mean, I think to me, the success of this is the surfer being able to articulate the difference between the boards. And if the surfer can't do that, you don't need to anonymize them and change the program. You need to find somebody who's more communicative. And Stephanie Gilmore is so far the champion of that. Like Dane Reynolds is pretty short on words. And he also surfed every surfboard as if it was a thruster. So it didn't really do the board any justice. And Stephanie Gilmore waited for the board to kind of communicate to her what it was about. And then she kind of found flow with that board and then came in and confidently articulated the things that she liked and the things that she disliked, and also what her own shortcomings were in riding a given board or where she couldn't quite figure it out. So I think that was the most successful version of any of these. So I don't know.
I think that's fascinating on a couple of levels, right? Because first, I think it speaks to Steph's humility, that she's willing to go, I'm just here to learn about myself. I'm not here to say, oh, this board is bad because it didn't fit me. I'm here to say, hey, maybe I could learn something from this board, which I couldn't quite figure out, which is pretty powerful, which, speaks basically to, on some level, to the female ego versus the male ego. But that's going to go down a rabbit hole. Let me just say that the first board he tried was the Simon Jones Morning of the Earth. To me, watching Noah ride this board, I felt like it needed some nose rocker.
Tell me about the board design.
It was basically what's behind you, but probably a smaller version, like a 510.
It was
a twin fin with tons of deep channel in the tail. The tail looked insane, but there were some late drops. There was some stickiness to the flatness in the nose.
Okay.
Look, maybe that board's not made for backdoor pipe. Maybe That's why. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I'm not saying that that the board design isn't valid and correct. I'm just saying that in the waves that the board was ridden in, it looked like it was having troubles with late drops. There were some moments where the ears were catching.
That makes perfect sense.
But when he got on the tail and was turning it, the grip and the tension of the channels off of the tail, it looked really pure and solid for a twin fin, especially through the turns. The second board was the Bonzer Campbell brothers. Jacob Campbell, I guess, a son of one of them, probably Duncan. I don't know, but when one of the things that Noah said, which I found was fascinating, he goes, the board worked really good when I got my foot in the right spot. And of course, I think that's true of any surfboard, but in my own experience, that's been especially true with the Bonzer, that when I got my feet in the right spot, that board was just incredible. Like the amount of drive and the amount of just positivity that the Bonzer provides is really cool. Now, the third board was the Panda. To me, that board looked a little bit too thick for Noah.
Okay.
Just, there was some thickness there.
Yep.
The Mayhem was the next board, a collaboration with Son of Cobra, which I'm not even sure I understand that collaboration. I guess Son of Cobra is a surfboard shaper too. I should probably know that, but anyway, Mayhem. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but anyway, the Mayhem might have been a little bit too experimental for Noah. Noah went into this thing as like, I ride one board. It's a Luke Short 6.1, and then when it's 12 feet, I ride a 7.6 Tokoro. Right. Those are his two go-tos. So maybe, the Mayhem perhaps maybe too experimental for, which is kind of goes against the grain of this whole thing. I'm sure that Matt and Son of Cobra were like, let's just go crazy here, which is the tenor of this. So I don't know if you can have too of an experimental design for this. I think that they want you to push the limits there. And again, this is, I think, a case where each board didn't get enough time in the water.
Right.
The Paizel was the fifth one. That board seemed really fast. To me, it looked like if Simon Jones would have incorporated the nose rocker of the Paizel into the tail of his Morning of the Earth board, might have had something there for Noah. The sixth board was a Timmy Patterson, the only thruster. To me, this board looked like the best board. Surprise, surprise, this seemed like the best board. It was the most contemporary design. And maybe Stab goes into it saying, hey, look, we like to have a baseline, so we always throw a thruster into this. I'm not so sure that does any justice.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
The next board was the Daniel Jones twin fin. It looked pretty good. Again, maybe not enough time in the water. The next board was the Schroff. We talked about that. The next board was a Town and Country twin fin, much thicker, more of sort of a 1978 Dane Kealoha style twin fin that I don't think Noah Dean liked the thickness.
Right.
And then the next one was a CI twin fin, which was a thinned down for modernized version of that T&C, which, again, at this point we've got 5'10" twin fins in the picture already, and yeah. I think at some point you can narrow this down to just 5 boards.
The Schroff, by the way, was asymmetrical, right?
I don't think it was asymmetrical. It may have been. I don't want to. I mean, I just watched it. That didn't stick out to me.
I'm pretty sure that it was. And if it was, that detail alone makes it unique and stand apart. Whereas if he's given a bunch of fairly similar twin fins, so with one, obviously I'm into wine. We do these blind wine tastings, and often the one that wins is just the one that stands out the most. Yeah. And if we had had any of these individual wines by itself on a different night and focused our full attention on it, we would have found all sorts of character in it that maybe would have made us like it even more. But once you add 10 of something, the one that is the highest volume just tends to be noticed the most. And that could be the thing with the Schroff. If it is in fact an asymmetrical, which I think it is, you just start feeling different sensations in it, and you go, oh, wow, that's different. That's new. And all of this kind of conformity now feels dull to me. And the uniqueness of this feels special.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when you do these wine tastings, do you ever do them with just 5 or 3?
Yeah, we do.
And is it better that way, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. If you can, yeah. And generally when we do that, we'll have a much more focused, like all Napa Valley Cabernet or something like that. And
Right, right.
if there's 10, then maybe it's Cabernets from all around the world or something like that.
Yeah, that might be something for these guys to think about. Perhaps they've cast too wide of a net. And again, I think maybe 5 boards is a good way to go. Just a
The
thought. Again, there's no right or wrong way. And by the way, there's no winner or loser here regarding boards. They're all great boards,
Well, the other thing
or
that
could be good
happens,
boards.
the other analogy that I think could be probably accurate with the wine, look, this is somebody's life's work that's put into this thing. And
Yeah,
once you start doing a comparative analysis, you as the critic are looking for fault. If I just open one bottle of wine for dinner by myself, I'm actually looking for virtue. I'm sitting there going, all right, I spent $20 on this. Like, I want to feel good about it. I want to feel good about this purchase. But once you start doing comparative, you're no longer looking for the good qualities. You're actually looking for fault. And I think
yeah,
that could be really detrimental. And honestly, those individual surfboard shapers put a ton of work. They put hours and hours into work
yeah,
into those boards. To then just put them up for the skewering is
yeah,
almost unjust, you know? Because
yeah,
again, if Noah, like you said, if Noah just had more time on that board, or forget about Noah, if any average surfer paid money for that surfboard and took it to the beach, they would really invest a tremendous amount of work and effort and thought into finding sensations that they like in the board.
yeah, for sure, for
And
sure.
that's an entirely different thing, but I think the point is still kind of relevant to the test that they're doing.
And I mean, you and I've had that experience where I've received a new board, ridden it a couple times, kind of went, put it away. And then months would go by and I would reach back into the shed and go, you know what, and pull it out. And all of a sudden, maybe it's summertime now. I'm not in a full suit. The water's warm. I'm a little looser and the board just feels great, you
Right.
know? So some of the things then based on this conversation, which might be cool, is we limit the number of boards. We suggest to Ashton, or if the guy's a beach grader, whoever wants to do something like this, limit the number of boards. What if you just did a twin fin version,
Yeah.
and then you did like a Bonzer version, and then you did like a mid length, and you just brought in 5 of those?
Yep.
There's room for that.
It's kind of a blend between electric acid surfboard test and stab in the dark, because stab in the dark does a very specific style of board, high performance thruster. And it's easier to anonymize that too, because
Yeah.
there's very little difference between them.
Yeah. And the other probably most crucial element that you already brought up, which is the guy that's doing the reviews needs to be more articulate.
Yeah.
And we've mentioned Ryan Birch is a great example of a guy who's a shaper and he's articulate and he can get point A to point B. And there is a disconnect between just like, you know, somebody such as myself or Noah Dean, which might be just kind of, well, not as articulate as we would hope.
So I think Birch would be probably the best example. I think Kelly Slater would be the ultimate get. He'd be amazing. He's
He
really
would be good.
articulate and he understands board design. I think Dave Rostovich could be amazing at it.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from the listeners if there's some people that we're missing that might be really good at conveying this and doing, you know, being a part of something like that.
What are your thoughts? I would like now for you to share an opinion, Scott. Don't hold back. What are your thoughts on Peter Schroff?
Peter Schroff is great because he's one of those characters that makes surfing and surfing culture so vibrant. We need guys. It's fun to have guys like him. He's sort of like, he's kind of cut from the same cloth as Mickey Dora, as I would suggest maybe Al Chapman. We're at no loss for sort of outside the box characters. And I think Peter Schroff is one of those guys. So I appreciate everything that Peter Schroff is about. You know, surf culture needs that. we need to move away from homogenization, and we need to continue to be where we've always been, which is sort of this kind of, you know, outside the mainstream, a little bit outlaw, a little bit individualism. You know, the more that we get sort of homogenized by whatever forces, the more you begin to look like me, a guy with a fucking Ruka t-shirt on that's like asking if you got any wax he can borrow. You know what I mean? Like, we need to get a little bit crazier. Peter Stroff in a Speedo with a friggin' chainsaw is pretty magnificent.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on so I'm glad you brought up the chainsaw. It was his performance art piece where I think the first one he did was in Rockaway, where he cut a Hayden shapes and it was all in kind of defiance of the manufacturing surfboards in Asia.
Yeah.
And so he was really outspoken anti-Asian surfboard manufacturing. And he's chosen Kelly Slater to be kind of the figurehead of that movement. So he's anti that, and now he's become anti-Kelly. How do you feel about him in regard to those things?
Well, I mean, he's passionate, you know, and so I applaud passion. It's such a fine line, right? Because I'm, you know, me personally, I don't want to focus my energy on the negative. I would rather be, you know, tend towards putting my energy towards the positive. And that's not to say that what Peter's did or is doing isn't a positive thing, because but I do think that there will always, at least at this point in time, for the next 100 years, there will always be small surfboard shapers. We're never moving away from that. It's just the nature of our manufacturing process. You and I can go buy a blank right now and become the next Peter Schroff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or my teenage or my 20-year-old kid, or, you know. So the idea that there's going to be some megla corp Asian surfboard manufacturer take over, first of all, that already exists. Firewire is that thing. Let's just not beat around the bush. Surf Tech is that thing. There is a megla corp that is building a lot of, you know, a big chunk of the base of the surfboards that you see when you walk into a surf shop. But those same people also get the fuel to their fire from the guys like Schroff and all of these other surfboard manufacturers that are out there. I mean, you know, Dan Mann is one of those guys, and Firewire goes, hey, let's bring Dan Mann into the picture, you know? And, you know, so I'm personally, I like that there's a Firewire in the picture, because what it does is there's a yin and a yang, you know. Without each, we couldn't have a circular ball. And you know, so I think from the 30,000 foot level, Firewire inspires Peter Schroff, and Peter Schroff inspires Firewire, and yin and yang is okay in my book. If we just had yang, maybe not so good, unless it's Andrew Yang. If we just had yin, you know, like I said, they need each other.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that the conversation about outsourcing manufacturing is a really good conversation to have. Like, there's lots of conversations to be had around that. And with any industry transitioning from cottage to commercial, outsourcing is one of the first things that happens. So it's no surprise that it would happen with surfboard manufacturing. It's happened with shoe manufacturing, furniture manufacturing, every type of manufacturing in America. And so that was inevitable. And there's really valuable conversations to have about what are they doing right in that business model, and how do we kind of streamline, I'm going to say as like the cottage version of the industry. How do we streamline the cottage manufacturers to benefit from some of those more efficient business practices, to cut costs while maintaining manufacturing in the US, all of that. But also, where do we put our flag down and notify everyone that these are things that you only get out of an American manufactured product, and start using that as your marketing. you can't compete with Asia manufacturing just head to head in the marketplace. You need to differentiate yourself and educate the user base on what the differences are and all that sort of stuff. So those conversations are salient and worth having. My concern with Peter Schroff, 2 years ago when this whole thing was really on fire and he was being very incendiary on Instagram, was he was driving the conversation into a ditch. It's like, Peter, this is an important conversation to have, and there's real things that we should be discussing. But by you just
he lacked solution. He didn't have a solution-based
not only
message.
that, it was so defamatory. The things that he was saying about Firewire specifically, Mark Price specifically, Kelly Slater specifically were inflammatory.
They were fiction too. I mean, it wasn't. A lot of it was fiction.
A lot of it was fiction. Unfortunately, enough of it was based in truth because he's worked with those people over the years that it was kind of like, oh, shoot, you probably shouldn't be airing that dirty laundry. That's not really your place to do. But it's also defamatory, some of the other stuff that you're saying. And so while I think that this conversation is important for Scott and I to have maybe on the podcast, we can't now discuss it because we're going to get politicized in your group and you're driving it into a ditch. Like, as the figurehead for this anti-Asian thing, you're driving this conversation into a ditch. So
and I think that's where it went. I mean, that's the problem. There was a short-term ego boost and a feel-good moment. And then long-term, I'm not sure we got anywhere.
Well, look, rational, level-minded people who are interested in what are the arguments for anti-Asia or why should I support my local shaper thought, oh, well, you're the figurehead of this movement and you're just like saying actually racist things. Remember when he did the Asian Eye Instagram thing? It's like, well, I don't.
That's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. So the people who wanted to like maybe support a local shaper go, oh, well, if you're the one driving this message home, I don't want to be associated.
Right.
And so I think that was detrimental to actually a really good cause.
Right. So let's bring to light a couple things that are good from each side of the spectrum, right? Like, so I would suggest to you that the Firewires are proven good surfboards. Like, they go through the ringer before they start punching them out. And I've ridden them. I own one. They're great boards. One of the things that's great about our cottage industry here in California and around the world is the nimbleness that we have. In other words, the board is behind you. We can shape, and we could actually ride tomorrow. They don't exist, and I could go buy the materials, do an overnighter, laminate the board tonight, hot coat it, and be riding it tomorrow. So we have this nimbleness that the others don't have. They can't be as nimble to the changing moods of the marketplace. So there's two good things, one on each side of the equation.
Yeah. I like Schroff for all the reasons that you said. Like, I think that it is important to have that figure. I love those figures. And I've always like seen Schroff on the periphery and had an interest in what he was doing. It was that conversation 2 years ago that made me kind of have a little bad taste in my mouth about him. And then Chaz and Derek on Beach Grit do a podcast called Dirty Water, and they actually interviewed Peter last week. And I was really interested to hear it because I think that this podcast medium will allow me to understand Peter on a different level, Yeah. And unfortunately, I could only get through 10 or 15 minutes of it because Peter was unwrangleable and he was so non-linear in his thinking. There was an element of it that made me sympathetic to him. Like, I saw a lot of his imperfection and a lot of his, I had more sympathy for him just as a human, like I could see where maybe he was insecure and that sort of thing. And so it made me sympathetic to him. But in terms of conveying any ideas, meaningful ideas, I didn't get any of that because I tapped into the sympathy part and I was like, oh yeah, I feel bad for him, or I also like him for these reasons, but he's not going to give me any information that I can actually walk away from this conversation with. Is like, knowing more about surfboard manufacturing or about why he hates Kelly Slater, or why he hates Firewire. All of that was just completely lost through his ramblings, essentially. So,
yeah. Well, that's too bad. I mean,
yeah.
what are you going to do?
Well, he could still make an amazing surfboard that Noah Dean loves.
Yeah. The board looks fun.
Yeah. And I like his performance art.
Me too. I'm a big fan.
The performance art is fun. I don't know if we're done with the electric acid surfboard test, which, by the way, very neatly packs into an acronym, which is EAST. We should just refer to it as EAST from now on.
East.
Yeah. But in regard to surfboards, I meant to ask you how the California gold surf auction went.
Oh, the California Gold Surf Auction was a huge success. Thanks
Good.
for asking. Yeah, we sold 59 of the 60 boards, and yeah, I mean, super excited about it. Thinking about doing another one, maybe in the beginning of December, maybe like a Christmas auction, maybe. I don't know.
Did values hit projections?
Yeah, we had, like all auctions, they're just volatile, right? Some boards go for way more than you expected, and some boards didn't go for as much as you expected. But yeah, we were like pretty much middle of the road for everything, so it was good. It was quite successful.
Can
I
you?
don't want to sit here and toot our own horn or anything, but we're excited about it, and we're looking forward to doing another one soon.
Can you tell us what the biggest disparity was? Like, which one sold for more than you thought? Which one sold for less than you would have thought?
Well, probably the big surprise was the board that didn't sell, which was probably, if not my favorite, one of my favorite boards, which was the Dick Brewer, Jack Reeves, chambered balsa wing pintail from late 70s. Has Jack Reeves and Dick Brewer's name in pencil on it. It's super light. It's just like a classic Hawaiian Brewer, wing pin that you would see like MR riding, in 1979 at Honolulu Bay or something. It's just super beautiful, kind of right in my wheelhouse as far as my demographic and, the pulling on my heartstrings. But that one had a pretty high reserve, and we normally don't do high reserves, but I just wanted that board in the auction. And so I kind of begged the guy to put it in the auction. He's like, all right, but I'm only going to, he put a high reserve on it, which is fine. But we just missed meeting that number. Okay. So, but anyway, it was good.
Very cool. Do you want to hear another follow-up to our Brazilian conversation?
Yes, I've got just enough time for that.
Okay. Filthy the Bear, one of our big contributors. And I don't know if you remember Filthy the Bear. I think it was his wife painted this oil painting a couple of years ago in Australia that won an award, and they named it Surfers Are the Worst.
Yes, I do recall that. That was really cool.
He sent us a couple of He sent us a couple of the news clippings from your motto from the show.
That's so great.
So anyways, hi, David and Scott. I was listening to you guys wax lyrical about the Brazilian topic, and I thought I'd highlight another perspective that is being experienced out there. I've been traveling and surfing since the early 90s and have watched as the reputation of my own countrymen and women, Australians, has gone down the toilet. Much like Brazilians, Australians often travel to Indonesia and other Pacific region countries in large groups. I never travel in a group because I don't want to be a bummer for other surfers when I turn up, but many Australians do. Often I found myself surfing and sharing waves with people from Europe, USA, and of course the locals at spots like Lakey Peak. And when a group of Australians turn up, they completely destroy the relaxed camaraderie that we've all been enjoying. The competitiveness and aggression of groups from either country is similar, meaning Australian and Brazil. I don't go to foreign countries to hang out with other Australians, and so I generally chat with Europeans or other local surfers, and what I found more and more is that Australians and Brazilians are thought of with the same disdain and contempt by the locals, Europeans, or the Americans. We are seen as loud, obnoxious, drunk, disrespectful, and aggressive. I often hear things like, oh, you're not like other Australians at all. You actually share waves. and this embarrasses me, and I can see their point. Anyway, a wise man once said to me, quote, everyone is someone's asshole, end quote. And it's definitely right. While we're having these conversations about Brazilians, just know that there are people in other places having the exact same conversations about us. Just thought this perspective was important. Keep spitting, Filthy the Bear.
Wow, that's a great email, and it's right on point. And there's no doubt that there's Brazilians that are like, oh God, look at that boatload of Americans showing up. And, you know, and certainly, I mean, I've been in Indo too, where, you know, a boatload of Hawaiian pros show up and it's like, oh shit, I'm going to have to paddle in basically, you know, Miles Padaka, Andy Irons, you know, a gnarly crew of Hawaiians is pretty upsetting from a serene surf standpoint, you know.
Totally.
And again, that's probably true of many Californians that show up, and maybe it's just the selfish nature of our sport, which is why surfers are the worst.
They are indeed.
They're embarrassing.
Hey, if listeners out there have 30 minutes or an hour to spare, this past week has been really big for surf films. There was a bunch of good movies that came out. You mentioned Not Stab in the Dark. Electric Acid Surfboard Test is a great one. Lost Track, the new film from Need Essentials that's set in New Zealand, is an hour long, and it is well worth watching. It's a little bit of a divergence from the previous films that they've put out, in that it's more documentary. There's much more narration in this. It's Torrin Martin and his filmmaker Ishka Folkwell on a journey. I forget how long this trip was. I want to say it might have been 3 months, through New Zealand on motorcycles. And they score great waves throughout. But again, documentary. So it's like the beginning in Australia, packing the bags, getting the boards, how they kind of save money for it and all that sort of stuff, to loading up. What do you take on a surf trip for that long if you only have motorcycles as your transport? So, and then running into issues along the way, dealing with weather, all that sort of stuff. Kind of a straightforward documentary, but phenomenal surfing throughout, and everything that we love to see from Torrin. So that's Lost Track. There's also Rip Curl put out a film called Postcards from Morgues, which was about Morgan Sibilic, and it features the whole Rip Curl team. Since they're not able to do a search film this year because of COVID, they do it all in 10 days in Australia, connecting with the whole team, and it's hilarious and really, really well done. So Postcards from Morgues is also really good.
Cool. You know, the Torrin Martin thing, a couple things. One, it made me look for my Need Essentials puffy jacket, which I cannot find anywhere.
Your son took it.
I'm going to blame my son. It's like probably at some buddy's house, long buried and forgotten, and I'll never see it again. And two, the opening scene of that movie was actually just an audio clip where they set up this whole Torrin's been in an injury. They're on the phone to basically 911 calling in this emergency, and then they leave, like, which is the ultimate bite the hook moment, which I bit. And so kudos to them for that. And I enjoyed the film. I watched it. I sort of skipped through it. I ran through it pretty fast.
Did you find out what his injury was?
I didn't, because I skipped
through it. But do we want to?
Yeah, don't spoil it.
I won't spoil it. It isn't what you think. Let's put it that way. I could give you 10 guesses and you wouldn't have guessed how he got injured.
Okay, good.
So that film is my must-see moment. It's really beautiful. I love everything those guys do. And then my Duke is 5-year-old Zachary Taylor for getting barreled at BSR Cable Park. How's this clip, dude? Did you see it?
Insane. Yeah, I did. That thing's mental.
Little regular footer just gets up and like holds a stance, like leaning into the wave. His eyes are probably closed, and he gets a little bit of a pocket ride, like a double cover up. What would be a double barrel, but it's more of a double pocket ride, but definitely like got the vision, got the stoke, and like his stance and style is just so classic. And the fact that you could do that at 5 years old nowadays is really, how am I going to hate on wave pools at this point? Because that was just way
what's
too cool.
interesting is I was down at Scorpion Bay in like, I don't know, 2003 or something like that. Right at the beginnings of the internet. Maybe it was more like 2001 or 2002, but I was down there, and at the time I was working for a magazine. I was the online editorial director. And my friend Colin Smith was there with his family, and he had his young son. And his son was probably 18 months old. He was 18 months old. He wasn't probably. He was 18 months old. And Colin's a great surfer. And Colin was on a longboard, and he was taking off at second point on his longboard with his son, who was in a like floaty thing in diapers. And Colin was standing on these 2-foot waves and literally taking his son and sticking his son into the tube.
No way.
And then pulling his son out of the tube and then sticking him back into the tube and then pulling him out of the tube. And I have it on video. It was like one of the most watched things on surfermag.com when I was the guy in charge there.
That is amazing.
And I'm sure it's somewhere out there. I mean, I obviously have the raw video somewhere in this office somewhere. But I bet if you searched, you might be able to find it. I don't know. But
Colin,
it was incredible.
18
months old, putting his son into the tube and pulling him out like numerous times. You know?
That is so radical. I would love his son has got to be like 20 years old now. We got to track him down and be like, do you remember that?
Yeah. No, his son's probably right around 20 years old.
That's insane. Have you seen Chris Ward posting video, or not video? It's mostly photos of him surfing with his son.
No.
His son looks horrified, like terrified, dude.
That's not good.
No, it isn't. But I mean, I guess he said, and his wife or his ex-wife has also said, like the son's actually having a blast. But you could see.
I don't know about that.
You could see Ward getting pretty aggressive, like going for off the tops, and the kid's face is like.
That's not okay. I mean, more power to you, but from what I've seen, there's no quicker way to make your kid into a video guy than forcing him to surf when they don't want to surf.
Make him into a video guy. All right. Well,
okay.
Good show, Scott. So we're not going to record next week.
No, next week. No, I'm going bowling.
So the week after? Yes,
the week after, and I can set you up with something. I want you to start thinking about what media outlets, and I mean like, is it Kook of the Day on Instagram or is it Stab Magazine? Which ones are the most relevant?
Our podcast.
Because it got me thinking. Well, of course. It got me thinking because I won't go down. I don't want to get started on this, but I want you to be thinking about this. So from the 1960s through the 1990s and maybe into the 2000s, surf media in the U.S. was the most culturally relevant, in my opinion, was Surfer Magazine, and probably in Australia it was either Tracks or Surfing World. But now, of course, this whole thing's been disrupted. So what is the most culturally relevant media outlet, news distribution prism? What is it? And I know it's more than one. So let's just chew on that. And
I have lots of thoughts, but I'll save them. I'll save them for the next show.
Save them, and we'll get into that.
Something I think about all the time.
Okay, good. Talk to you soon. Until next time, adios and aloha.
All right.